This is the Hi, it's Evie. It's so good to be with you. It's so good to talk with you. I want to jump right into the purpose of today's video, and that is, as you already know, we've got a training coming up on December 13th at 3 o'clock, and I want to say thank you. Thank you to every single person who signed up. It is crazy to think that I met my goal of registrants in just 2 days. You guys, that's unbelievable. You've blown my mind. You've blown me away. I'm thankful and grateful to you for that opportunity. As a part of the signups, I asked individuals who came and went to the website and signed up to send in any questions they might have so that I can answer them leading up to the training, perhaps in the training, so on and so forth. And as I was going through those questions, I realized that it would be an excellent opportunity to share some freebies with you. So, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give away some secrets for free right now. Whether you join the class or not, whether you come to the workshop or not, you are going to get some key answers right now from me about change based on the questions that were sent in. So let's start. The first question that came in was, how do you enable change during a high degree of uncertainty at a company? I really love this question. Number one, because it is a difficult question. I don't want you guys sending me the easy stuff that any person could answer. I want you to ask me hard questions about change. It's the only way that we're going to grow. It's the only way that we're going to get better. And it's the only way for you to understand how serious I am about making sure that you all are empowered by your knowledge of change. So let's talk about this one, because most organizations have half of this answer right and the other half wrong. Okay? So, the correct answer is to anchor your people. Most organizations have that right. The tricky part is anchor them in what? Because when you're dealing with uncertainty, one of the prevailing issues of uncertainty is you literally don't feel anchored. And so what happens is organizations understand that anchoring people and giving them a sense of trust or something that they can rely on or something that they can look to as a North Star in uncertainty is important. The problem is they anchor people in the wrong thing. Most organizations want to anchor people in mission, in vision, in culture. That makes no sense. And not only does it not make sense, it sets you up for failure. Because what happens when decisions, uncertain tides, changing tides, and all of the other things that come with change are counterintuitive to the mission and the vision? Then all of a sudden, your folks are looking at you and going, that doesn't feel consistent. You said you were about this, but you're doing this. And when you put your culture, your mission, your vision on the chopping block, not only does it come across as you're trying to cover for something and it feels insincere, it also comes across, if anything, for any reason feels counterintuitive as those things, it comes across as a breach of trust. And so now you have a schism with what you say you are and what they're seeing, and you've created an issue, all because you put your vision, your mission, and your culture on the chopping block. The reality is, pointing to your vision, your mission, and your culture is a red flag for anybody who's watching as an organization that makes them feel like, oh, it's really about to get bad. And it increases the worry in the organization in times of uncertainty when you don't have to have that. So that reason and many other reasons, do not say the mission and the vision is what's going to anchor you through change. Here's what really anchors you. Studies show the best anchor in times of uncertainty is actually relationship capital and fair exchange. Let me explain. Leaders that people trust being honest and saying, look, I'm not sure exactly how we're going to get through this, but we will. I'm sticking through it with you. We're figuring this out together. I will be in it with you. And ecosystems that give grace in uncertainty. Those two things extend the capability and the bandwidth of your organization to sit with the tension of transition long enough to generate success and results. Okay? How does this show up? It shows up differently at every level of the organization. So let's go back to the root question. How do you enable change during a high degree of uncertainty at the company? If you are a senior leader, a CEO, an owner, a founder, then you need to convert into a highly visible sponsor in times of uncertainty. Sponsors need to have a measure of visibility anyway, and they know that. And so you will see sponsors regularly sending out messages, especially in the events of organizational updates. But in times of uncertainty and in times of major change, it is time to respectfully stop hiding behind the communications department to send the messages and thinking that you've checked the box of engagement and visibility. You're an incredible leader. You're a great leader. That doesn't cut it. It's not enough. You've got to get out. You've got to walk the halls of your organization. You have got to be physically visible. For virtual visibility, you can do things like luncheon chats, breakfast brunches, Q&As. Hop on with people and let them, keyword, anonymously submit their questions and share their worries and help them and be that assurance and that anchor. And it's okay, even as a senior leader, if you say, I don't have the answer for that yet, but I'm hoping for the same answer and outcome too, and we're just going to have to see. That's an acceptable answer. It's okay if you say, you know what, it depends on the tides. If our industry goes this way, it will provoke these sets of decisions. If our industry goes this way, it will provoke these sets of decisions. It's okay if your answers are non-answers. The point is visibility, and the point is authenticity, and the point is a sincere connection with your organization that we're going to get through it together. You cannot achieve that. Even the best communications department in the world cannot achieve that through impersonal messages alone. So you've got to get in front of people. Now, if you're a senior leader, you may say, oh, but I've got to stay in my motivated mind. I don't want to be brought down. I don't want to be dissuaded. I don't want to be overwhelmed by any negative reactions or worries. You don't want to be blindsided by them in the event of delivering on your investment as well. That's number one. And number two, that's why in times of uncertainty, you get a coach. It is critical that executive coaching is a part of your personal acumen at that time, because you will have to come down from the clouds and connect with the people who are really going to be impacted by the change. And then you're going to have to figure out a way to get yourself back into vision mode. And preserving that by hiding is not going to cut it in times of uncertainty. You've got to take the risk, get out in front of the people, walk the halls, be incredibly visible, ask people, get feedback on how they're doing and what's going on. And then you're going to have strong peer relationships or executive coaching relationships to pull you back into vision mode. And as you reflect on what you have received, hand that over to the people whose design and role is to help people align with your vision. That's going to be change folks. That's going to be talent management folks. That's going to be CX folks. That's going to be strategic folks. That's going to be anybody who's invested in the infrastructure of the organization. If you have an EPMO, if you have any sort of continuous improvement, Six Sigma black belt people in your organization, they are the ones who can take what you have received and do something about it so that you can lay it to the side and go back into vision mode. But if you are a senior leader in times of uncertainty, it is critical that you become highly visible. So that's the answer for senior leaders. Now, let's go back to the questions for middle management and what they need. So let's go right back to the question again. How do you enable change during a high degree of uncertainty at a company? If you are a middle leader, I need you to understand that transition is hardest for you. Why? Because what you have to do is you have to keep your team calm, but psychologically, you're probably also a bit stressed yourself. You have to keep everything under control. You have to be a pillar of trust for your team to keep them operating in the day-to-day requirements of the business. But you also have fears, worries, concerns, and the like. And so it is very important that for middle leaders, we have to offer in times of uncertainty extra bandwidth for them. Whether it's PTO days, additional PTO days for them, if they've been working extra hard overtime on a project and they need that intentional time away, whether it's automating some of their processes so that they have time not to just be heads down all the time, but to pick up their heads and spend quality times with their teams, assuring them, building that relationship capital, and spending it on the behalf of the change, whether it's consolidating topics. So a lot of these leaders have 5, 6, 7 meetings on one topic that they are going through. Consolidate them and shorten the amount of meetings you're putting on their calendar for a single topic. And the other thing that you can do for middle managers is you can optimize prioritization. Prioritize what are the most important things that they need to get done, and what are some of these things that I hope would be done by end of quarter, but we can push it to the next quarter so that you can get yourself and your teams through change. You've got to build extra bandwidth with middle leaders. Why? Taking the pressure off of middle leaders will actually accelerate transition instead of causing it to drag on. Why? Because grace and relationships help middle managers to help their teams get the mistakes out the way quickly. This gets you to the place of proficiency faster because people are comfortable. They feel they have their manager with them. They feel they have support. They feel they have engagement. The manager can hold them to the next thing I'm about to talk about. And that is essentially working with them to try out the change, to get comfortable in the change. The manager can help facilitate them through that. So that's a critical element of helping in times of uncertainty. You've got to watch the bandwidth of your middle management in times of uncertainty. I can't stress it enough. Now, we've talked about senior leaders, we've talked about middle managers, people leaders, and everyone in that band. Let's talk about our frontline folks, our frontline high quality deliverers, our individual contributors, our folks who keep the business going day to day. They are essential. They are incredibly special. It is very important in times of uncertainty. Let's go right back to the question. How do we enable change in times of uncertainty? In times of uncertainty, it is important to keep them informed and encouraged, right? The current state, and this is what you have to understand about the current state. The current state is why frontline workers show up to work every day. Being proficient in keeping the business running is literally their job. And so, if anything impacts that proficiency, they automatically will feel a sense of threat of their job. Their safety, their sense of safety goes out the door. Even if you had no intention of causing that, that is the natural reaction to shifting the current state with no instruction, no engagement, and then holding them to a standard that they have no idea what's going on, right? So how do we combat that? You can help them in the following ways. Here's some more freebies. Create low stakes, high exposure scenarios to the change. Low stakes, high exposure scenarios, okay? For instance, a new system, they're going to have to operate in a new system. You want them to be proficient in it. You spend a lot of money on it. You expect an ROI within a certain time. Create a demo environment. Let them play around in it for as long as you can before it goes live with no connection to any live productions. So high exposure, very low stakes, no connection to any live productions. Hold fun games where people who are working in the system can perform their functions and get rewards. That's going to help you identify who your early adopters are, as well as the future people who will probably end up being SMEs for this system. So you will allow the exposure and the time with low stakes and high exposure. It gives you time to realize and figure out who's rising to the top of that engagement and that adoption. Those are the people that you use to help inspire the rest of the team to come along, to give answers and to engage. And you do this in a way that reflects that you mean it. You invest in the change at every level, right? So the people who are early adopting, the people who are, they come in and it just seems like they understand how to lift and shift the organization from one to another. You get talent management engaged to tie adaptability to the leadership framework and create more visible people who can handle gray areas. Now that is an investment in culture. That's an investment in culture. If you want to talk adaptability, watch who your your early adopters are in changes, and tie that to visibility, tie that to team leadership. That doesn't necessarily mean promotion, doesn't necessarily mean a financial element. But if you have that to offer as a part of your investment in the change, especially when you see that consistently time and time again, let those early adopters rise to the top, because they're going to be the people who are comfortable in the gray area. They're going to inspire bandwidth expansion of that as you grow. The other thing that you can do for frontline folks, create safety nets. Create safety nets. It is not feasible that if the day-to-day job that they have requires, especially if there are performance metrics around volume or time. I'm thinking people who have to be on a call center, recruiters who have to call a certain amount of folks, people who have to clock in, clock out on their time, people who have to physically deliver things in a certain time, right? I'm thinking anybody who has to meet a quota of sales. If there are volume or time related quotas and they have 40 hours in a week to do it, and you're adding a change on top of that, it is not feasible to ask them to meet that quota and also adapt to the change. So we can do one of two things. We can create a safety net in that quota requirement and understand that there's going to be a degradation rate in the performance over a certain amount of time and not penalize them in their annual performances for that. Same for middle management, not penalize them in the performance of their team. If your change is going to impact for a certain amount of time the optimization, take those degradation rates that are going to naturally happen and apply it all the way down. You take the pressure off, you create safety nets. That's how you build sincere trust. So you can do that. You have option one, which is to take the safety net off. If you don't have the leeway, we all know that certain times of year you have certain requirements. If you're in a spike in sales, you do not have time to slack on other things. Then either move the change to where right after launch, up until the timeline that you expect your ROI to come, that you've positioned the change so it does not impact your busiest season, and your frontline who can't control that is not paying for it, and your middle managers who can't control that are not paying for it. Or you can add in an extra layer of time. So if I expect, and I'm just going to make this up for the sake of creating understanding here, if I give you 5 days to work in a week and I expect 10 units sold every week, during the course of this change for the first 3 months of launch, instead of asking for 50 units, I'm going to ask for 40 units, and Fridays are going to be adopt the change. Or a half a day, 45 units. And Friday mornings, I'm going to bring in some coffee. I'm going to bring in some donuts. We're going to have a good time. And I'm going to ask you to lean in and adopt the change. And I'm going to adjust the timeline. I'm going to create a safety net for you to explore and adopt and get comfortable with this change. The other way that you can manipulate time is to extend the training time. So this is why I think the whole wave of agile rollouts became so good, right? Because the truth is, if you can achieve a minimum viable product, why not move and improve as you go? It makes total sense. Well, a way that you can do that is segmenting and stretching out the change so that there's optimization in the way that people are engaging with the change time over time. You have a massive department of people and you need to achieve it. Roll out 10, then roll out 10, then roll out 10. And this way, you can have other people manage the load of the people who are stepping away from training. So if you're willing to extend your adoption timeline, you can also create strategic safety nets in your delivery. Okay. Now, I've talked about senior managers, how they can enable change and uncertainty, middle managers, and then I've talked about frontline folks. There's one missing person. There's one missing section on how to enable change and uncertainty in business. And they're the most important in the world. They're why we do what we do in business, and that's your consumer. That's your customer. Because you can do all of this internal work and be so far removed from your customer that your customer does not come along and buy what you're selling, adopt what you're doing. They fell in love with the culture and the way in which you do things, and now it feels too different to them. It feels unfamiliar. They feel disconnected. All of those things can happen, right? So the question becomes, how do I enable change with the consumer in times of uncertainty? Here's a tip and trick. Customers, make sure they feel important and special. That's what you can do. Make them feel important and special. A customer's reaction to uncertainty is going to show up in their buying practice. And again, there's a percent degradation that's going to happen that will be natural with that, but there is a certain amount that goes too far that lets you know you veered off of that path. So you can work with folks like CX, marketing, merchandising, finance teams, and you can work with them to turn your experiments into their bespoke experiences for the consumer. So prepare them in advance. Take a small segment, prepare them in advance for a highly experimental environment, but completely remove any stakes attached to their needs. So if they have a certain expectation around consumption, they're regular consumers of your product, set aside consumption of the product and prioritize delivery to them before you even ask them to participate. So before you even ask them to get engaged, set aside volume, delivery, experience, prioritization for them so that you can assure them that while they're in this highly experimental environment, the stakes are virtually zero. And this is the way, in addition to other perks, offering prioritization, helping them to be a vanguard and advocacy of change. This positions them as well with lots of exposure in a mutually beneficial way. So you get to be on all of our marketing materials, which brings attention and engagement to your local business, ownership, brand, whatever it is. You got to find folks with a brand and ask them to be a part of this. And this gives you more relationship capital with them because you're out there with them, you're engaging them in a testing environment, but you're giving them white glove treatment. And the relationship capital will grow, the stakes will be zero, and you'll get all the answers on the test environment that you want. And you'll have a sample group of advocates before you roll out who can speak to their fellow consumers and put it in the words of their fellow consumers about why they need to embrace the change. All right. So that's all 4 segments. All in all, the point is that if you're paying attention to each one of these, there's one prevailing thread here. And that is that uncertainty is the chance to see who will rise to the top to stronger position the organization at every level. Uncertainty is going to make senior leaders stronger senior leaders. It's going to make, if they're out there and they're incredibly visible, it's going to make the organization trust them 10 times more. You are spending relationship capital to buy it. The product is not the only thing that you invested in. You're investing in relationship capital with your organization as well. Middle managers, if you're giving them that bandwidth, you're investing that, you are getting an ROI of managers who have the space and the bandwidth to pick up their heads and give you quick, real-time, valuable feedback from multiple teams. Middle managers are so important in that regard. If you give them the bandwidth to communicate upward and build relationships downward, you can see any kinks in the rollout plan coming 5 million miles away. It's why stakeholder management is the key success indicator of change every single time. Frontline folks, if you give them the sense of safety, they're unafraid to play, they're unafraid to practice, they're unafraid to try, they're unafraid of failure. You remove all of those, you shorten the adoption time, and guess what? A shortened adoption time is a quicker ROI realization timeline. So now you're finishing projects on time, in budget, and you're catching your ROIs sooner. You're catching the windfall sooner than you expected. And this is why being good to people is always good business. If you help people, they will help you be good at business. And that's really, that's really the message of change. That's really why I'm even doing any of this. And I wanted to share all of this with you because number one, it was an incredible question that got sent in. Number two, as you can tell, I just spent a really long time answering that because I wanted to be very detailed about the answer because the answer is so good and the question was so good. And I wanted to make sure that you had that time. But number three, this is half of the entire time that we'll be spending together with training. Can you see how fast it's going to go? A 45-minute power shot of a change masterclass is going to go like that. And so I'm so excited to see you in class. We're going to move fast. We're going to get high quality things out there. But in the interim, as you can see, and I hope you realized, I've got a lot of secrets to tell, and I'm going to tell you them all. I'm going to give them all to you. So this is Q&A sessions with Evie. That was the question. We answered it. I'm going to head on out. There might be a few other questions that come in, and I'm going to post the answers here as well so that we optimize our training time together. But that's so you also can kind of get a sense of what we're going to be talking about and what we're going to be sharing while we go through training. All right. I'll see you December 13th, next Friday at 3 p.m. Bye.